27th meeting is in session. The Board of Planning Commission. Would you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Caput?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Wolke?
Here.
Mr. Bridgerton?
Here.
Mr. Gary? Mrs. Mahan? Mr. Forrest?
Yeah. Here.
Okay, we have the minutes of our January 13, 2016 meeting. Excuse me. Do we have any additional corrections or deletions to those minutes?
Move the minutes be approved. Support.
Motion and support for the motion to the meeting minutes to be approved. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. And I want to thank the Planning Commission members for appointing me as chairman once again in my absence.
You are so welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Next matter to come before the Commission is the Historic District Review of 206 South Market Street. Does staff have a report?
Yes, we do. The applicant is requesting Planning Commission to review the refacing of an existing freestanding sign located at 206 South Market Street. This was formerly being utilized by Station 5 and will now be occupied by Reliable Tent Rental. The material for the proposed sign is black and blue vinyl lettering on a white Alumicore background. There's a sample going around. The sign meets the current sign code regulations. Wanted to point out that any outdoor displays associated with this business would require a certificate of appropriateness for consideration by the Planning Commission. Because the sign is in compliance with the sign code and the historic district, staff does recommend approval.
Any questions of staff?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sitterton?
the posts, I see the sign, I see the picture that you've got in here. Are they going to do anything with the posts? Are they going to paint them, dress them up?
Mr. Rose is here. Yeah.
What color? Black. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions from Commission members?
Move for approval.
There's a motion to approve,
Second.
and there's a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Bridgerton?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Caput?
Yes. The next two matters, items number 3 and 4, both deal with rezoning applications for the City of Troy on property that is or will be part of the park system. As President of the Board of Park Commissioners, I have to bring to everybody's attention that it hasn't gone before the Park Board yet for approval, right?
That's correct.
It seems to me we're missing a step here, that you ought to go to the Park Board to see if the Park Board even wants to rezone it before it comes here.
If that's, I guess, the wish of the park board, we could table this discussion. I could go to the park board meeting and then bring it back in a future
I'm
meeting.
not saying that anybody's opposed to it, but I think in order to go ahead and take care of the formalities that are necessary, I think it needs to go to the Park Board first. The Park Board has a responsibility for control and maintenance of all the properties that are in the parks. I know that the Eagles Camp property is not in the parks right now, but it certainly was purchased for the purpose of doing that.
But it actually is under the name of the City of Troy.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's deeded to the City of Troy.
Right.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I don't think we've had a rezoning of this kind of property, so it didn't even
Think of that.
get on a radar screen.
Sure.
This is a fairly straightforward rezoning, though. As my understanding, it's just to bring it into the same zoning as Duke Park is right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Would the Planning Commission consider a recommendation of approval, should we go through the report, with contingencies that the park board approves this as well?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, why don't the staff go forward with its information then, on item number 3 in particular.
This is for the rezoning to consider rezoning 117.27 acres, kind of known as the Eagles Camp Farm. It's located just north of Duke Park. Currently, it's county zoned, a mix between A2 general agricultural and F1 floodplain. We are requesting that it be zoned R4 single family for the plain fact that the Duke Park that it abuts is R4 currently. We're just matching zoning districts with that. The comprehensive plan, when I looked that up, it shows the area kind of dominated by future residential use. But it does talk about in the Parks and Open Space chapter to expand the park system and open space requirements commensurate with population growth. And we felt that the park was certainly needed here, which is why we've moved ahead and purchased it and then annexed it into the city. Because it was annexed, it's really the reason we're asking for the rezoning to be established. So we would ask Planning Commission to make a positive recommendation with the contingency that the Park Board does approve this for the following reasons. One, it's consistent with the intent and purposes of the City of Troy zoning code. It's consistent with the surrounding zoning districts. Proposed use would be allowed in the district, and it's consistent with the City of Troy comprehensive plan. We are not actually requesting a public hearing.
Okay. Any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman, I got a question.
Mr. Forrest?
On the approval, there's going to be a restriction put on it that it will be used as parkland? Because this, zoning is the R4. When I read that at first, I got concerned, but going back and reading what can be put in there, this parkland can be put in.
We
Can
cannot
we
put that restriction on there. It would be, once you rezone it to a district, it could actually fall within anything of that. The caveat you would have is that this is owned and deeded to the City of Troy, where we would control that. And we don't actually have a district specifically for parks. They're allowed in a lot of our zoning districts, so.
Tom, what would happen is if the City of Troy wanted to sell this or transfer a piece of property, then that's when the restriction would be placed in the deed or the covenants for the property.
Think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary.
This is, I'm getting a little bit ahead. We've got two pieces of property that are going to be rezoned for parks. One's going to be R4, and the next one, I believe, is some business or commercial.
Correct, that would be B1 in the next
Yeah.
report.
Is there any preferred zoning that we would want with parks? I mean, one's going to be a business and one's going to be residential. Not that it makes any difference. I know that parks are allowed, but I was just curious if there's any substantial differences there.
Isn't that based on the adjoining property?
Yeah, we did the B1 based upon that. When you look at the comprehensive plan, it actually shows that area north of that park as business, and then the parks does fit within the B1, so that's why in the next report we've approved that one as the B1.
And if we jump ahead to the next one, Jim, there is a restriction on that property that when we received it, there's a deed
Right.
restriction on it that it can only be for very passive parkland.
Right, I remember.
Okay, so that one's not going to become a commercial property.
I was just curious in the sense of, we put concession stands in the parks and all that type of thing. Is it better suited to the business zone or residential zone? If you were to
Yeah, the
lease out
concessions.
the concession services. Where that makes
Well, we do, but any of the concessions are just to support the park anyway. So
Right.
again, it just goes back to what was adjoining, and that's why we wanted to be consistent with that.
And
No, I think
Parsons.
consistency is important, so I'm not arguing that point at all. So.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Tippett?
Back to the, we'll call it the Hewells Camp property, although one of these days it won't be known as the Hewells Camp property anymore, which alludes to my question that, or question/comment that believe that we are in the process or going to be starting the process to combine that property with existing Duke Park, and it's just going to be part of Duke Park. And then as a next step, a little later, although in the next few months, then there would be some lot splits that would occur, one of which I guess the northwest side, where the 38 acres, I believe, would be partitioned off along the river, and assuming the grant comes through for the Miami Park District, would be sold to the Park District as conservation easement.
Are you talking about the floodplain portion of it?
Yes, absolutely. And then we also intend on splitting off the house and possibly the barns into a property, and that would be resold, split off and resold, at which point I believe the staff's intention would be to come back to Parks and Planning Commission and ultimately Council with a different zoning depending on how we split off that particular parcel. The parcel, the floodplain parcel, would not require any other rezoning, and the house may not require any rezoning either. But that is a possibility ultimately.
Sure. Any other questions for staff?
So we need to,
Let's talk about the public hearing
Yeah,
first.
that's what I was
Okay.
gonna say.
I'll entertain a motion, one way or the other, as to whether or not we should hold a public hearing on this issue.
I would make a motion not to hold a public hearing since the council will be.
Second.
And there's a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Please call the roll. Keep in mind, a positive response is not to hold a public hearing.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Barry?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It is passed, no public hearing.
Next, as to a recommendation of City Council, do we have any further discussion on that issue?
As I understand, the appropriate motion would be subject to the approval of the park board to accept this as park property.
No.
To accept the rezoning.
No, it's subject to the park board recommending the rezoning to the planning commission and council. As a courtesy, if not a requirement, depending on the action or the item that's being considered, property that is park board property that ultimately is under the control of the council starts at the park board with a recommendation and just kind of moves up. We did this, I guess, I don't know if it was backwards, because we really don't have a precedent, at least a recent
I
one.
think there is some precedent, but the city maybe negligently did not go to the park board.
Well, that's possible, except that this property is deeded to the city of Troy, not
Right.
to the park board.
Right.
In the event
I'm
that it
thinking
was a
about
park
many
board
years ago.
property. Well, there are some properties, Larry, that are deeded to the park board. There are other properties that are deeded just to the city of Troy.
Right.
So, as a courtesy and working together and having as much discussion as possible, there's absolutely no problem in going, and it's appropriate that we would go to the park board. But if we had gone to the park board first and before we came to the planning commission, then we would have been asking for a positive recommendation of the park board to have it rezoned, and then it would be coming to the planning commission.
I guess I would have assumed that the courteous thing to do would be to ask the park board, do you want it? Now, certainly, I hope they do, but, is that the point you were making?
No, I don't want to. Yeah, the point I'm raising is that the action here is to go ahead and recommend the council the rezoning of that property.
Right, which
It-
I
it's a
don't know
piece-
that necessarily requires anything on the part of the park board, but I think out of courtesy, we probably ought to ask them, do you want it?
Do
But they're
we
not
want the
getting
rezoning
it.
or
We're
want the
not.
property?
Yeah, the
Oh,
rezoning.
you're not planning on?
We're not
setting
going to
it
deed
or-
it over to the park board. The rest of Duke Park
deed
is
would remain
already.
with the city,
It
not
would.
with the park board.
That's correct.
And it's my position, Mr. Walke, that I don't care who it's deeded to. If it's a park in the city of Troy, the park board has
Has some
the
weight.
requirements of maintenance and control by ordinance. So therefore, the park board has to go ahead and give its affirmation that it wants the property rezoned before it comes here, or as a condition to the rezoning request.
Well, having been warned not to practice law without a license, I won't dispute that.
I got one, sometimes I'm not interested in doing that.
Nonetheless, doing this as a condition, under the condition of going back to the park board, that's not a problem, I don't think, with us.
And I don't think it'll be a problem with the park board, but I don't want to assume things that I'm not qualified to assume. Okay, that being said, is there such a motion?
How we going to state it?
You want to make the motion?
Do I?
I'll tell you what, since it was my ball of wax, I'll make the motion. I make a motion to recommend to City Council that the property known currently as the Wheels Camp Farm be rezoned to R4, but such recommendation be stayed until such approval is received. An affirmative recommendation to the Planning Commission and Council received from the Ward Park Commissioners.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll. Oh, wait a minute, she's still writing.
That was a long.
Mr. Titterington.
Yes.
Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Mr. Forrest.
Yes.
Mr. Pappas.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, next matter for consideration is rezoning application for Treasure Island Park. Does staff have a report?
Yes, I do. Just before I go into it, will this follow the same requirements? Because this is north of Treasure Island. Would this
You're
go-
darn tootin'.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to make sure before I went on. Essentially, this is a rezoning for two parcels. One is 4.594 acres, and one is 0.283 acres of land. It's located just north of Duke Park. Currently, the property
Treasure Island.
is what?
Treasure Island Park.
Oh, Treasure Island Park. I'm sorry. Currently, the property is zoned F1 floodplain, and the applicant requests the zoning of the parcel be to the B1 local retail district. The land around the park, it's bounded on the east by the Great Miami River. Surrounding zoning districts include F1 floodplain to the north, east, and west, and City of Troy B1 local retail district to the south. Once again, with the annexation of the property, we wish to establish city zoning, and the B1 district allows public parks, and it is consistent with what Treasure Island is currently zoned. Basically, based upon that, kind of the same as the last time, we are not recommending a public hearing, and we would ask for a positive recommendation with the contingency that an affirmative motion is passed by the park board.
Any questions of staff?
No.
Okay, let's deal with the matter of the public hearing first. Does anyone want to have a public hearing? Is there a motion for
Make a
that?
motion not to have a public hearing?
Motion by Mr. Forrest. Is there support for that motion?
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Mr. Forrest.
Yes.
Mr. Pappas.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Wolke.
Yes.
Mr. Titterington.
Yes.
Approved. No hearing.
Okay, next is the recommendation requested for the rezoning application. Any further discussion on that issue? Since I made the last motion, I reiterate that motion for this one. Okay.
I'll second
And
that.
there's a second by Mr. Forrest. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Forrest.
Yes.
Pappas.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Wolke.
Yes.
Mr. Titterington.
Yes.
Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Does staff have anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Commission members have anything they want to discuss? Mr. McGarry.
Just one question. You had the meeting last week for the Hobart School welding. Did that go well, or was it well received?
Yeah, we heard several complaints. There was basically no comments made about the actual rezoning itself. Some other comments were made, but nothing about the rezoning.
Well, what kind of comments were made?
A lot of it was about traffic and noise, maybe from some of the students leaving the Hobart School of Welding onto the public streets. That was basically that dominated, I guess, the discussion at the meeting.
The wild and crazy students, huh?
And those
That are
issues-
adults.
Your words,
That
not
are
mine.
adults by,
and those issues aren't really relevant to the rezoning.
no.
Not to the rezoning, no.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.
Go home.